Hello, everybody. My name is Benny, and welcome to The Fool's Apprentice. Today, we are doing our one card study. I have a guest who is willing to do the Wheel of Fortune, a very challenging card for me. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Benny.
Hi, Raleigh. Raleigh, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. I've been reading the tarot for about 25 years now. I got my first deck um, uh, when I was like 19, 20 years old in college.
Wow.
And I've been using them pretty consistently since then. You can find me online at thebearoracle.com.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of a moribund website, but occasionally I do post esoterica related subjects on there.
Very awesome. Okay. And what are you using the original Rider-Waite-Smith Wheel of Fortune, or are you using a different one? I'm using the Neo Rider.
I have multiple versions of that deck.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Okay. Do you have one with you right now?
I do. I have the Radiant,
Ah,
the travel one in the tin, because I never go anywhere without a deck. And I don't actually use the Rider Smith Weight as my primary deck, but I've probably used it more than anything else. So I'm familiar with it. And of course, this is in no particular order, but I do have an RWS. Here it is. Okay, we're on the same page
yeah, I
and
want
the
to see what
same
it looks
phone.
like. Oh, okay. Can you
It's a
bring it
little
up
tiny
closer to
one.
the camera? Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay.
So it's basically just a vividly colored version of the
Yeah.
Rider Smithway deck. Yeah.
Do you like that version? The coloring?
I do. I also like the fact that it's nice and small and it is something I can carry around in a satchel all the time. But I actually have to confess, I don't like the RWS Wheel of Fortune at all. And that's kind of one of the
Um,
things I thought would be interesting to sort of talk about. I think there are times when the Golden Dawn went a little overboard on the symbolism, and I think this is a good one right here. And I think it creates challenges for people when they're trying to learn the tarot, when they're suddenly approached with a wheel that says tarot, but it could say Torah for law, it could say Rota for wheel. It has the Tetragrammaton.
oh my
There's
God.
Hermanubis arising, and then there's Typhon, the serpent falling, and then there's the four symbols of the four fixed signs. You know, there's Virgo and Taurus and Aquarius
Yo.
and right, and then there's but they also represent the four angels and the clouds and I think what gets lost in all this is the actual sort of wheel itself. Um,
Because
the
it's the
Tarot
main
de
point.
Marseille. Yeah, well, the Tarot de Marseille in the French would say La Roue de Fortune, which is Fortune's wheel. And
Uh,
it's kind of a weird linguistic shift that we could say Fortune's wheel or the Wheel of Fortune. And I think when we do that, we begin separating the wheel from sort of the idea of fortune. And I'm kind of riffing on. Are you familiar with a fellow by the name of he's a philosopher. He does the School of Life channel on YouTube. He's just written a
no.
couple books. Alain de Botton,
No.
I think I'm saying his name correctly. So yeah, he likes to talk about a medieval idea of fortune that we've kind of lost, and I think this was something that I've been thinking about recently, where um, we would say, well, your book that you just wrote didn't sell. It must not be very good. When
Mm.
instead we could say, your book is excellent. It's just a shame that you weren't fortunate enough to get it in the hands of a good publisher.
Ah,
And there's
okay.
a big distinction there. And
There is a
I
big
find
distinction.
that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there that just like we can just pick singers. Like there are a lot of really good singers out there, like who I think should be on the radio, but they're not because they don't have a company or they don't have a manager or something. So yeah, it's a shame that you have this beautiful voice that everybody can't hear. So I get that idea.
Uh, what are you? Uh, what are your thoughts about the Wheel of Fortune? How do you like to approach this card?
Well, first, what I want to say is when you were speaking, I was like, ah, that's 25 years of, of working with the tarot. I was like, okay, okay, yeah, I'm nowhere near there. So I so it's one of the cards. I have a very simple understanding of it. I know there's a lot. So first and foremost, I know that it is a card that represents change that is going to occur, either in one part of your life or a whole shift in your life.
Hmm.
Also, I strongly believe in karma, so much so that on my shrine I have a karma Buddha statue,
Mm, okay.
and it's a constant reminder that what I put out into the world, I will eventually receive. It doesn't necessarily mean that what I put out today will show up in a week. It might show up in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But it really represents um, a karmic change or karmic feedback that you get. Um, it also can represent, because of all the deities on there, the idea that you can like tap into your spirituality to kind of change or guide your destiny or the things that you want in life. I believe that that can happen, and that you have, and this is interesting. So, like the magician has all of the elements, but here you have it as well as is like sulfur, water. I have my note here: sulfur, water.
Salt and mercury, I
Yeah,
think.
yes, and so it's like having all the things that you need as well uh, to help you along. Uh, to, so it's like a destiny card as well.
Hmm.
When it now for me, when it let's say it shows up in a spread for me, it just lets me know that things are going to change, usually for the better. Uh,
Right.
and so it's for me to look for opportunities uh, and be very mindful of how things can change, and that the choices I make during that time frame, however long it will be very, very important in the outcomes that that
Okay.
spread has. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What's your overall take, just like in a reading?
Um, so I can kind of go a couple different ways. Off the top of my head, I do tend to look at this as um, that random events will take place in our lives and they fall outside of anything we have control over.
Okay.
So I think sometimes the wheel can represent there are situations that you can't have any control over, because they're outside of anything that you have any agency over. Um, Also, I think if we take a look at, say, the Fool's Journey, where he's going through the lessons of each of the major arcana, um, that this lesson is the lesson of prediction. So the fool has, he's met all the earthly people, the lovers, the hierophant, the empress, and the magician. So he's met all of these other people, and now he's confronted with that which is impersonal. That things sort of happen, and that they don't always happen to good people or bad people, or for good reasons or bad reasons. That there is just things that happen, and they
Life.
are outside of his control. And but there are also the cycles of life, and
Yeah.
so you could think of the wheel also as being the face of a clock. And the only way we can make any predictions about the future, and by predictions I mean like the weather, or um, when is a good time to buy stocks, or when's a good time to take a special route to get to work or to the grocery store based on traffic, is based on your own personal experience. So I think that the fool confronted with the wheel of fortune has to now confront a world outside of himself that he has no influence over. And you kind of have to roll with the punches. But I do like your idea about keeping in mind sort of the wheel of karma, that you do get out of life what you put into it. So I think that's also a very important lesson for people to take away from this.
Yeah. Yeah. So the life cycles, and I really do like, because the idea of things happen in life that are unexpected that you have no control over. which for me is like that cycle of life that occurs that, um, another way I look at it is a sense of impermanence.
Mm-hmm.
Things are constantly changing, and so it could be really bad right now, and then you get this card which indicates it's going to get better, uh, or
Right.
it's going to change, or it's going to look different. So I always think that's another thing when I look at this card is um, it's impermanence. It's a constant change in life. What it looks like this morning, it may not look like that this afternoon or this evening
Yes.
or a year from now. So it reminds me that life isn't like you're not always going to be in a bad place. You're not always going to be in a good place. Sometimes you just might be
Mm-hmm.
in a boring place, and that's just what it's going to be for a while until it changes again.
I think to add on to that, that it is a good reminder to be very present and in the moment.
Mm,
I think what people wheels will redirect one of two ways. Either wheels on a car like indicate a change in direction, but the
oh,
wheel of fortune I think is based more on a water wheel. So it's about transmuting the energy from water into the stones that would say grind the corn. So I
yeah.
think that there are deep rooted changes that take place that we're not necessarily always aware of, where one force is being transmuted into another. So, on a much deeper level, this card also represents sort of a very deep change from within in how we respond to these external influences in our life.
I think that's
When we learn to
wonderful.
be well, when we learn to be less stressed out about things that we have no control over,
Yeah.
not to be overly stoic, although the Stoics I think had the right idea about that, but I think you know when we stop getting wrapped up in those things, then that because a lot of tarot books will say, you need to find the center of the wheel, don't be on the outside of it, which on the one hand makes sense, but on the other hand, I don't know that if you're giving a reading to someone that's going to always resonate with them because
Yeah.
it's kind of abstract. But if you said to them, like, stop taking things personally, most people aren't worried about you, they're worried about themselves. Or just because bad things happen doesn't mean that you deserved it to happen to you.
Now
Sometimes we just,
you triggered something for me when you talked about not getting wrapped up on things we can't control. The serenity. Do you know the serenity prayer?
I'm familiar with it, yes.
Yeah, that idea, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Hmm.
That whole idea of like, okay, I can't control this, so be with it, experience it, know that it will pass, or knowing that there is a decision you can make to change it. But it just reminded me of that when you were speaking.
Right. I think uh, the wheel can also represent like if you take a look at other wheels too, I think another famous example would be a Ferris wheel.
Mm,
I think also that sometimes when life is unpredictable and uncertain, because the future is uncertain, all we
mm.
know is the past, and from that, we make judgments about the present and hope they come true in the future. But I think sometimes we find ourselves in situations where things are changing very rapidly. The Eight of Wands would come to mind, for instance, if it was linked with the Wheel of Fortune card. And I think sometimes you just need to appreciate the ride for what it is. Things are changing very quickly. Uh, you may be going through your own sort of growth cycles. And I think sometimes people take this a little too seriously. And I think part of the Wheel of Fortune is also to remember that, um, gambling can be addiction, but can also be a fun pastime. And I think if we don't take it too seriously and don't get wrapped up in our own drama, but stop and just sort of, imagine that you're on the Ferris wheel. You Eventually, you will get off of that particular ride and back on stable ground. But while you're going through those changes, look for the fun in it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking fun because you think of a Ferris wheel, you're like, oh my God, a Ferris wheel. But actually, when you get on it and you just let yourself be, it's actually a nice little ride. It's very relaxing. You have this very, very intimate moment with somebody. You can
Right?
see the world in a different perspective.
Exactly.
So it can be appreciated. Um, oh man, you triggered something else that I wanted to share. Um, oh, it's this idea that this is what makes life worth living, are all these changes that occur, these small little changes to these big changes. And even those really dark places lead to a place of gratitude later because you've gotten through this challenge or this really bad experience, and now you're experiencing joy or happiness or contentment, but you wouldn't
Right.
know what that is unless you had those challenges that occurred, which for me is the Wheel of Fortune as well.
Yeah, it's a very deep card, and I think it does speak to how we tend to get wrapped up in our own inner worlds a little bit too much sometimes, and we need to stop to experience the outer world and all of its mystery, because things will happen to us that we'll never ever fully come to understand.
Yeah,
Relationships will end and we'll never get closure on them. Why did this friend suddenly stop talking to me?
yeah,
That's an unfortunate sort of situation. And you may come to your own realizations about it. And those sorts of things build character. And by build character, I mean make us a better person if that is what we are choosing to draw from the wheel. I think it's very important that we take that lesson to our hearts that, um, this is going on and how can I use this to change myself?
yeah. That's just part of like resiliency, developing that resiliency
Hmm.
due to the changes that occur. You're really making me think very critically. I didn't realize I would have this kind of a conversation. I thought I was going to come in and, okay, let's see how it goes. Oh my gosh, the wealth analogy you have is amazing. What's your favorite? Do you have your favorite wheel card with you?
I do. And now I learned how to read the tarot by using the Elemental Tarot by Carolyn Smith and John Astrop.
Okay.
And it is loosely RWS based.
Okay.
By loosely, I mean like the major arcana are loosely based on it, but the minor arcana uh, are completely different. There's no swords, cups, pentacles,
Oh,
wands. It's actually just the elements. And so the Three of Air, for instance, is a very different card from the Three of Swords. And
oh, how so?
I encourage people to pick up, although I do love this deck a whole lot, but it may not be for everybody because it is very different. But I do encourage people to learn a very different system from RWS, because we can get kind of stuck on, oh, the Three of Swords, you're being betrayed, or um, but if you saw the Three of Swords with the Wheel of Fortune, you could also say, you know what, you're kind of milking this. It's over with. You need to move on with your life, like that, but I happen to like this card right here. This is
Oh, that's
the Wheel of,
interesting.
yeah, because there's a person in the middle, and the key word here is change, but the name of the card is actually fate.
Yeah, I see that.
Um, and I think fate is something we grapple with here in the West. I think that in Eastern mysticism, and maybe even you could say the same thing. A lot of indigenous peoples have a much different idea about that, and I think we can draw from that. We can sort of stop and kind of consider, like, how much of our lives are shaped by other people and outside influences versus how much we bring to the table, and not just nature versus nurture, but also we as individuals growing into that. What kind of changes can we make to make ourselves better, make our communities better? I think that there's a rich amount of meditation, and I think those are the sorts of changes that I've been going through, which is kind of why I hit this card and hit a brick wall and wasn't able to kind of move forward with it. But I thought maybe if I had this conversation with you, I could articulate what I've been writing in journals about and sort of, kind of come to my own sort of sense of internal change.
Awesome. Now, what deck does that one come from?
It's called the Elemental Tarot.
Okay. Okay.
It was recently re-released, and it's just very interesting because it's just so completely different.
Okay.
Um, if people are really used to the RWS, but you can find it like on Amazon or something,
Yeah,
or
I think I've seen it recently. So I'm somewhat familiar, but I'll look into it. Mine comes from, are you familiar with the Tarot of Echoes?
I think I've seen someone doing a review of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, very interesting.
the artist Anatolian, she actually does a walkthrough. So it was her
Okay.
way of doing a guidebook, but through video. So
Oh,
I thought that
interesting.
was
Okay.
super interesting. But this is the one that I really, really like this one.
Yes, yes, I like that a lot. I like the fact that it emphasizes the wheel and the different experiences, and that sort of rotating, cyclical, helical movement.
Yeah.
Very colorful too.
Yeah, well, I see all the colors with the elements. You can see
Okay.
fire and earth.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the two people at the bottom. For me, it's this idea that for me that feels very karmic. You know, the idea of what you put out, you get back eventually. It's like looking at yourself or getting,
Mm,
giving and getting.
I think that's a
I
good
like
way
that
of putting it. Yeah.
it feels very grounded to me. Where are my glasses? This isn't actually a much. I got this deck because I like her artwork. But
Right.
I didn't realize how much I would like this deck. I mean, her interpretations are so interesting. Um, but I like that. The other reason I like this card is because I don't feel overwhelmed with all the symbolism.
Okay. Yeah.
That is one of the things I like. You still
Yeah.
have the Torah. I think it's the Torah, the letters
Yes.
on there, but you don't have all the other symbols like the Sphinx and um,
Yeah, I find that the beauty of the Rider Smith Waite decks are the minor arcana being like vignettes because those are things that we can relate to. I do find that some of the majors tend to be a little overboard with symbolism with a capital S. Uh, and I that's one of the reasons it's always interesting to me to see how other people reinterpret that. I have some beautiful decks that are very very symbolic that I don't use for readings, but sort of kind of contemplate how much thought went into it, and uh, but at the same time, I also tend to like things. That was a really beautiful wheel card that you were just showing. I
yeah,
think
I love it.
blues and greens and reds. Yeah, I think it's very well conceived.
She's amazing. She are you familiar with her, Anatolian?
No, um,
She's the one that did Bone, Stone, and Earth Flesh.
okay. I
Uh,
am a little out of the loop on sort of modern tarot. Yeah, I kind of follow it, but then I kind of don't. I did kind of go through a bit of a spell where I started collecting decks, and then I kind of put the brakes on it because I was like, um, I don't want to be buying them just to be buying them.
yeah,
But at the same time, like, I also haven't run across that many that really wowed me recently. So, um, but I think that's just like the ones at like the Barnes and Noble, for instance. But these are all from mass marketers. So, what was her name again that did that deck you were just showing me?
oh, Anatolian.
How's that spelled?
Last name is Tourian.
Okay, yes, yes, yes. Okay, yeah, I'll because I think what I've been trying to do recently is to cruise the more back roads, like Etsy or the people who sort of self-published, because I find that there's a lot more interesting, or the smaller publishers out there. But
Yeah,
I'm kind of only scratching the surface on that. I really don't know much about that.
yeah.
Um,
There's some really great decks on Etsy that
I I've enjoyed a lot of your walkthroughs, and that's one of the things I like watching other people's sort of their honest and open, authentic reactions to some of these really beautiful decks.
I
Even sometimes when
found.
they have a negative reaction to something, it's still
Oh,
very.
yeah, I've had a few. I will tell you that one of the best Etsy uh, tarot decks that I found was the Lord of the Rings. There's a Lord of the
Interesting.
Rings one,
Okay.
not the mass market with the.
Yeah.
This one is actually based on the movies, so the images that you see, you actually can see the actor that played that
Okay.
character in there. Extremely well done. Extremely well done.
Okay.
Well, I'll talk to you about it after we get off. Okay, do you have anything else that you would like to add about the wheel?
Um, so one thing I did want to point out was that on these the major arcana cards, they quote text from the Nag Hammadi, which is um, a poem that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's
Mm-hmm.
called "The Thunder Perfect Mind." And each one of these has a quote that goes with it. So for the Wheel of Fortune, um, it says, "I am control and the uncontrollable. Do not be ignorant of me. Be on your guard." And I just find that those little quotes are very sort of thought provoking because they're usually in a contrast, like something positive and something negative
Yeah,
together. But in this case, I do like the "Do not be ignorant of me, be on your guard," because I think if there's a warning to the Wheel of Fortune, it is not to get tripped up but to pay attention to those cycles and those
yeah,
things that are changing and all the things that are impacting us from inside and from outside. So I'd like to end with that. I think, when the wheel pops up, we really need to pay attention. All the major cana are, a big red flag that, hey, something important's going on in your life. But this is one that I think can be more subtle than some of the other ones because it tends to be so impersonal. And I think we should all live our lives with a greater amount of intentionality. And I think
yeah.
that's something that comes across from this card. Definitely much like you were saying about the sort of karmic debt that we all carry sometimes.
I love that. Karmic debt. I've never heard that term together. I like that. I'm going to use that. Now, you said this is a poem, The Thunder Perfect Mind.
Yeah.
And who do you know? Do you remember who it's by?
If you look up Nag Hammadi
Uh,
texts, Naghamadi, the name of this, it's called Thunder Perfect Mind. And that's sort of the English translation of it.
Okay.
Um,
I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, it's very interesting because a lot of the lines that they use for each of the major arcana, and they're structured sort of in these kind of couplets where one thing's contrasted with something else. Very very interesting though.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I
Of
really
course.
appreciate it. This is great. A much more in-depth conversation than I expected. Let me tell you, your 25 years of experience came through. Uh, but everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, my name is Benny, and I am the Fool's Apprentice.